So I did a video explaining all the different types of tubas, but there are a few things that didn't make the cut and a few things that need a little bit of explaining, so that's what this video is. Now I'm not including all the crazy one-off historic tubas because there are a million of those, and I'm not including euphoniums even though they are definitively tubas. My argument for why is in this pinned comment of the other video. I'm also not including ophicleides because they aren't tubas. I know it's a common misconception, but ophicleides came before tubas and were part of a completely different family. Tubas started their own family. With that out of the way, these are the odd tubas and the non-tubas. Travel tubas. I mentioned them briefly in the other video, but I really didn't do them justice. Now, even though they look smaller, they have the exact same amount of tubing that a regular tuba of their key would have. It's just shrunk down and twisted more compactly. The problem with making it so compact is that the tubing twists more, which creates more air resistance, which makes it stuffy to play. You're probably most familiar with the Wessex double B flat travel tuba, but you can find them in all four keys: F, E flats, double C, and double B flat, and from a lot of different companies. At a glance, you could think one was a euphonium or a baritone, but they have a slightly different shape, a lot more tubing, and are actually smaller than a euphonium. With their tiny size and smaller weight, of course they're great for travel, but they can also be good for a compact gig, or maybe if you just have to stand for a while playing and you don't have a strap. With that small bell, it's also easier to get a practice mute, or even a mute of any kind. Tuba mutes, especially practice mutes, are generally pretty heavy, expensive, and just an overall pain. Having a smaller bell makes it a lot easier. Now, of course, with that tiny diameter, you're not going to get the super wide, dark tuba sound that you might expect in something like a symphony. Now, that doesn't mean it sounds like a trombone either. For its size, it has a surprisingly tuba-like sound, even if it's not the sound of a 6/4 tuba. They're not something every tuba player needs, but for certain situations, they're a game changer. The subcontrabass tuba. When I say subcontrabass, I'm talking about the monstrous triple B flat tubas. For comparison, this is a regular contrabass double B flat tuba. It has 18 feet of tubing. These tubas are novelty horns, with only a few in existence. There are at least 5, but possibly more. These aren't novelty tubas for people like you and I to just learn for fun. These weigh a ton and they're not exactly portable. Like I said, a double B flat tuba has 18 feet or 5.48 meters of tubing, and when you go down an octave, you double the length of tubing, which means a triple B flat tuba has 32 feet of tubing. Now, some of these tubas don't have working valves, so they can only play the harmonic series, but if they do have working valves, they require 2 people to play. 1 to blow in the mouthpiece and 1 to do the fingers. These few tubas, because they're so giant and not very portable, are only used as a novelty sometimes, like in the Harvard University Band. Most of the time, they just sit in museums or private collections. There's actually evidence of Adolf Sax making a triple E-flat subcontrabass tuba that had 52 feet of tubing. It stood over 10 feet tall, 3.04 meters, and had a bell diameter of 1 meter, 3.28 feet. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to exist today, which is really sad. The French tuba in C. Retired Brass actually mentioned this in the comments of the last video. I highly recommend you check out Retired Brass's channel. Let me tell you right now, he's a way better ophicleide player than I am. Now, these do fall in the historic tuba category, but the more I researched this, the more I realized I had to do a segment on this. These are part of the saxhorn family, which technically separates them from true tubas, but look at them, they're insane, I had to include them. These tubas were used until about the 1960s, mostly in French orchestras for their strange abilities. Now, these are pitched in C, a whole step higher than euphonium or baritone horn, but because of the 6 valves, they can get down into the tuba range and to the pedal tones a lot easier than one of those could. It's got a slightly smaller size and diameter than euphonium, and has the cylindrical bore and bell taper you'd see on a traditional sax horn. Now, even though it does have a smaller size than even euphonium, it sounds more tuba-like, at least to me. Now 6 valves isn't uncommon for a tuba, you'll see them a lot on F tubas, but for something higher than a euphonium, 6 valves is very unique. And with 6 valves, the lower you go, the more valve combinations you can have. Once you get to the lowest registers, it gets pretty wild. These were an important part of tuba history, especially in France, but they've kinda died out and are mostly just used for period representation now. Now on to the non-tubas. These are not tubas in any way. It can get a little confusing with the range and maybe having tuba in their name, but they're not tubas. Now at the end of the other video, I gave cimbasso an honorable mention, but I was really vague and didn't do a good job explaining it. Cimbassi, which is the plural for cimbasso, are not tubas. They're valve contrabass trombones. Giuseppe Verdi, the 19th century Italian opera composer, famously hated the sound of the tuba and thought it didn't blend well with other instruments. He really wanted something that had a trombone sound but played in the tuba range and was something that tuba players could easily switch to. Verdi himself didn't create the instrument, he commissioned an instrument maker to do that. Its biggest use is in operas, especially Verdi's own operas, but other composers loved it too. Now most commonly you'll find cimbassi in the key of F, but you can find them in all 4 standard keys of tuba, which makes it really nice because tuba players can just switch over to their key of cimbasso without having to learn new fingerings. Cimbasso mouthpieces are designed to work best with the horn, but they do have a standard tuba shank, so you can fit any tuba mouthpiece on there and it'll play. The Wagner tuba was named after the famous German composer Richard Wagner, and despite the confusing name, it's not a tuba. It's actually close to a French horn, which I think is really funny that they both have a confusing name because the French horn isn't French. The Wagner tuba is played with your left hand and uses a mouthpiece close to a French horn, so a lot of times French horn players will double on this instrument. They're not really an instrument you would give to someone as a first instrument to learn or someone to use as a primary instrument, but more companies have been making them, making it easier for people to own them. They're not tubas, but Wagner did take inspiration for the shape from the tuba because he wanted a bit of the tone while still having the French horn's smoothness. Since they are technically hybrid instruments, it's really hard to describe the sound. Some people say it's like a baritone and some people say it's like a trombone, but it's really a mix of everything. You just have to hear it for yourself. The intonation and sound is just slightly different from French horn, so you can't switch from French horn and expect to play perfectly the very first time. And just like a French horn, it takes a really good player to get the best tone from it. Another big difference is that the bell is pointed up, so the sound is projected differently, and French horn players who are used to tuning with their hand in the bell can't do that anymore. It's definitely an interesting horn, and if you're a French horn player, it could be something fun to check out. Now the Tubax. This is another confusing name, and you might think it's some fancy hybrid of the tuba and the saxophone, but it's just an E-flat contrabass sax with a slightly different shape. This isn't some crazy extinct instrument either. It was made in 1998. It's not even 30 years old yet. It's different from a traditional contrabass sax with a smaller diameter of tubing and a more compact design similar to a contrabass sousaphone. The purpose was just to make contrabass sax a little bit more accessible, as it's a little easier to hold and it takes less air to play. It's got the exact same fingerings as other saxes and even takes a baritone or a bass sax mouthpiece. It also appears Eppelsheim, the creator of the Tubax, makes a subcontrabass Tubax in the key of B flat, which is an octave lower than the bass sax. While Tubax is definitely a cool name, I think it's a little misleading. It has basically nothing to do with tubas. I've heard people call the Ophicleide a Tubax because with a name like that, you'd expect something more like this. So those are the odd tubas and non-tubas I thought deserved a spot in this video. If you thought any of these instruments were really interesting, there are experts and other channels who go in-depth on each instrument, so I highly recommend you do a little research. If I got a fact wrong or messed something up, please let me know in the comments so that I can fix it in a pinned comment. But other than that, have a nice day.